Recording, testing 1, 2, 3. It's okay? Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Seniors, What You Should Be Working On Now webinar. I'm joined today by Ms. Kata, one of our 5 amazing counselors here at Rockridge High School. She'll be walking through this packet with me, as well as Ms. Sanabria, our registrar, who is going to help with some questions at the end of this presentation. As some of you may notice, if you joined our live version, we had over 100 people on it, but yours truly forgot to record it. So we're doing this version again. So please bear with us and we'll get started. So there are 2 objectives for today's call. One, we want to take you through the updated portions of the senior packet. Seniors, you may have seen this back in the spring with your one-on-one with your counselors, or it's been posted on our website. We took down the version that's there now so that we could update it based on the fact that you are now seniors, provide some more current information just based on the data we've gathered from the class of 2020, as well as all the changing dynamics of the admissions world based on the pandemic. So we just wanted to get the most current information out to you. Second, we wanted to make sure that you all are very aware that we're here to support you and give you information. And as the counselors come back to work in the next couple of days, and myself over the course of the next couple of months, we want you to feel supported and have the information that you need. While some of you may have gotten a lot of emails over the weekend from various colleges saying that Common Application is now open, you can apply, do not feel stressed or pressure to apply today, tomorrow, next week. Given the current climate, the college admissions groups are also struggling to do the right thing and figure out how they're moving forward. On a daily basis, we're seeing different colleges announce their test optional or they're moving their application deadlines. So trying to apply right now may be doing yourself a disservice. In addition, you don't have all the necessary tools to apply, like your transcript or maybe a letter of recommendation, etc. So take a beat. We want you to feel comfortable. It's a great time to prepare, and that's out for the next 30 minutes or so, and then look to apply later on. Okay. So before we jump into this, I have a PSA for you, a public service announcement. If there's one thing you get out of this webinar, it's check your email. Check your LCPS email and check your personal email on a regular basis. Your LCPS email is going to have information coming from myself, your counselor, the counseling department, and Mr. Duhlman. It's going to have important information like when certain rep visits are available, when scholarships are happening, various deadlines. So as well as the opportunity to meet with your counselor, they're going to set up a set more for you to set up one-on-ones with them. So please check that LCPS email. In addition, check the personal email that you created to start your Common, Coalition, or other applications. That's how colleges will communicate with you. You might get a text blast about the fact that the Common App is now open or some information about that school. But in terms of them being able to contact you directly because your application's missing something, or they want you to do another step, or they have new information for you, that's going to come via email. So you need to be checking your email account. I would recommend setting up an alert maybe for Tuesdays at 2 o'clock and check both those emails on a regular basis. Okay, all right. So we're ready to jump into the packet, and I will hand things off to Ms. Kata.
Hi, everybody. So the first thing we're going to talk about is some post-high school opportunities. Google recently came out with some certificate programs that are taught by Google employees. They're in the subject of data analytics, project management, or user experience. They typically take 3 to 6 months to complete. You do not need a college degree, and it prepares you to enter into the work field. Another opportunity that we can provide students is taking a gap year. So on the Loudoun County website, there's a great list of resources for students who are thinking about taking a gap year. They have webinars by conducted by industry workers who can advise students on what to do during that gap year and what travel opportunities there are as well. If your student is interested in the military, we have a list of our reps that work very closely with Ms. Barnes and the counselors to contact students, visit with students, and provide any information that they may need. NOVA is, it's obviously a great place to get your associate's degree, but it can also offer a lot of certificates there. And these courses are less amount of credits than if you were to get your associate's degree. So if your student wants a certificate and then to enter in the work field, NOVA has a lot of great programs to offer. For example, a dental assisting certificate. And apprenticeship. So last April, we were supposed to have an apprenticeship fair, and on the county's website, we have a list of businesses who were to participate, and you're more than welcome to reach out to those businesses to see if they still have opportunities for apprenticeships.
Great, thank you. So the next section, this is actually a poster that might be familiar to you all outside of the Career Center in the hallway. But this has been updated with the data from the class of 2020 from Rockridge. This list is of the top, I think, 43 colleges that were applied to from the class before you. You'll notice the average and minimum SAT, ACT, and GPA for each of these schools. Now, I would kind of throw out the test scores at this point, and we'll talk more about that in depth in a minute. But this just gives you a nice snapshot as you kind of think about where am I going to apply and what are the odds that I might get into that particular school. This information is pulled from Naviance. So another way to look at this information is on Naviance in the scattergrams. And in case you're looking to apply for some of the elite schools, where you'll see here on Cornell and Johns Hopkins, Columbia, etc., you can see our students in the class of 2020 were not accepted there. And unfortunately, I'm not sure why the GPA and test scores are not showing up. But if you go to the scattergrams, and we can show you that at the end of this call, you can see that information for that particular school. With that said, we're going to move on to the Virginia College application info. Now, this info has also been available either on the Career Center wall or outside of it, but we've updated it for several areas, and you may not have gotten the particular point of this document. This lists all the Virginia schools, both public and private, and some information about the application process for each. What type of application, the application deadlines, regular and early, as well as the fees associated with it. And there's a lot of shortened or abbreviations on this. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see this key that'll tell you that CA is for Common App, COA is for Coalition App, and then the early decision and early action, being both binding and non-binding. There is more in-depth information on the definitions of early decision and early action in the full packet that you'll receive from us later this month, but this just gives you an idea. And then lastly, there's the SRAR, the self-reporting academic record. So this applies to certain schools who don't want an official transcript from the counseling department. They want the student to upload that information in terms of all the courses they took across their high school years, as well as the grades that they receive. This applies specifically to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's our only SRAR school at this point. So what you would do for Virginia Tech is complete the actual college application first for them. And then once you complete that, you'll fill out the SRAR for them, which they'll provide you with a link for. The other new information about Virginia Tech is that they've added the Common App. In years past, it's just been either their application direct or the Coalition App. So now it's nice that you all have the option to apply via the Common App. Finally, I've added, a TO column, which stands for test optional. So now you can see all the schools within throughout Virginia that are test optional. You'll see an asterisk next to some of them. That means those schools may have already had a test optional policy. And a lot of times in that case, they had a minimum GPA associated with it. meaning if you didn't have at least a 3.2 or a 3.0 or a 3.5, you couldn't apply test optional. So some of those parameters still apply to these schools. So you want to check that particular school's website carefully to make sure you're doing the test optional appropriately with them based on your GPA. So sticking with test optional for a minute, this page is on the SAT, ACT. As you're all aware, many colleges have gone test optional. So if you go to fairtest.org, you can find a very active list of all the schools going test optional. They update that list daily from all the different schools. It's a great list. It also flags any caveats in terms of if the particular school has a minimum GPA or other caveats in terms of applying test optional. A couple other things I want to point out on the test optional is read the fine print on the school itself or go to their particular website. You need to ask a couple of questions as you're looking at their test optional policy. Do they need the test scores for the merit scholarship? So in some cases, the school might say, yes, we're test optional for the actual admittance. However, they may still want test scores in order to offer merit scholarship or to allocate that money. Or you may need those test scores to apply for their honor college at their particular school. Or finally, maybe for a specific program like nursing or engineering. I've seen in looking at a lot of the schools that when they're going test optional, they tend to waive it as well for the merit and for the honors college. However, many of the schools hold to specific programs of study, particularly nursing and in some cases engineering. So make sure you're reading through each of those or reading through their policies specifically. Lastly, there are some schools that say, hey, we're test optional, but we really, really want you to submit a test score if at all possible. One of those happens to be Cornell University. If you're within 50 miles of a test center, they want you to try to take that test. And if you're not able to take that test, they may look at your application, the rest of your application, a little bit more stringently. So something to be careful of. Another school like that is Purdue University. And in fact, they don't even call it test optional. They call it test flexible. And they as well are looking for you to still take that test if at all possible. So one question that arose in the live programming was like, well, is Loudoun County still going to host all these SAT, ACT tests, as you can see the dates listed here? We don't know the answer to that. We know it's top of mind. Mr. Terry, our Director of Counseling, has been asking that question quite a bit. We're not really sure if that authority is with the particular school doing the hosting or at the LCPS level or what. So we highly recommend check your College Board portal, check your ACT portal for any information. I've seen posts on some of the LCPS pages that say that people will go and check the portal and all of a sudden they signed up for 3 and only 2 are showing. So things are kind of changing real time. So it's important to stay on top of those SAT and ACT test dates. The last thing I'll say on test optional is I'm actually a mom of a rising or of a senior this year as well. And, we're kind of confused as well in terms of once you're filling out the application, do you put that you will, submit test scores based on, taking the October test or the November test? And will I be held to it? But what if my scores aren't what I wanted them to be, especially if this is the first time you're taking the SAT and you might have had high hopes to get a 1450 and lo and behold, you come back out with a 1050. So some schools are holding people to what they commit to on their application. So for example, Ohio State or Michigan State, if you select on the application that you will be submitting future test scores, they want to see those test scores. So as Ms. Cotta said on an earlier point, you really need to do the homework and you need to ask the questions. So this is a good question to ask the reps when they are doing virtual calls with you all. You can also email the representatives directly to find out how are they actually using test optional or looking at test optional within their particular school. I did go out and survey a bunch of the representatives that we have a working relationship with, and their input was across very diverse. And I will send out that information to you, even if it's not a particular school you're interested in applying. I think being able to look at the different ways the schools are approaching test optional will give you a better sense on how you might approach it with the schools that you're applying to. All right, back to you, Ms. Cotta.
So every student is going to complete a transcript request form or submit a transcript request form once they've decided that they're going to apply to a university. So I'm going to walk through this form as an example. For college name, you could put whichever school you're applying to. So for example, George Mason University, the city and state, Fairfax, Virginia, and the deadline. So the deadline is going to match the type of admission decision type you're applying to. So if you're applying early action to George Mason University, you're going to provide their deadline as November 1st because that's George Mason's early action deadline. The next question, is this an SRAR school? Like Ms. Barnes was talking about earlier, self-reporting academic schools are schools that require students to complete a separate academic form where they list all the courses they've taken in high school and the grade. So essentially what's on a transcript is what students are going to be submitting. That means that since they're the ones submitting it, the school is not requiring a transcript from the counseling office. So George Mason is not an SRAR school right now, so you would select no. Does this college require a counselor letter of recommendation? It's very important that you check the university's website because not all schools require a counselor letter of recommendation. And if they don't require it, they're not going to read it. So if they do, you would circle yes. If yes, have you turned in your Blue student and parent insight sheet? I will go over that in the next slide. But basically, that is a sheet of questions that students are to fill out to help their counselor write their letter of recommendation. So if your student is circling yes on this form, that means they should have already submitted or are submitting along with this form their student insight sheet. Does this college require a teacher letter of recommendation? So this is kind of the same thing as a counselor letter. It's very important to check the school's website. Some schools do not require a teacher letter of recommendation and it's optional. Others do not want you to send one. So every school is different. If the school you're applying to requires one letter of recommendation and you write 3 teachers named on here, we're only going to send one. Because that's all the school wants. So it's very important that you check the school's website and indicate how many teacher letter recommendations you want to send. Are you applying via Common App? You will indicate yes or no. And a question that came up in the live chat is, what is Common App? So Common App is an application method that you use that you can apply to many schools using this application. Okay, so when you look at the school's website, you'll be able to see which application format or platform they use, whether that's Common App or Coalition. So for George Mason, you'll be using Common App. So you'll circle yes. If you have you completed the FERPA waiver on Common App? And same with, have you matched your Common App to Naviance? Those 2 steps will be covered with your student when they have their individual meeting with their counselor. Those 2 steps have to be completed in order for us to send your transcript to the university. So again, those 2 steps will be discussed in your individual meeting with the student. And then, are you applying via Coalition? You will not be for George Mason. Or are you applying through the college's own application? So some schools will either allow you to use the Common App or their own application. So it really depends on what makes more sense for the student. If they're applying to 6 schools and they're all on Common App, then it makes more sense for them to just use Common App for that school and not the school's own application. So At the bottom here, we have a list of college application deadlines. So for this example, I used the early action deadline of November 1st. Right next to it is the deadline of when this transcript request sheet needs to be submitted to the counselor. We typically need the transcript request sheets as well as the student insight sheet at least 3 weeks before the application deadline. So if you have an early action deadline of November 1st, you would have to submit your transcript request sheet no later than October 11th. So we have the major college application deadlines and the deadline to match when you need to submit your transcript to your counselor. On the second page here, it's really, again, just reiterating the college name, the address, and the signature required for us to send all your information. Below is the student insight sheet. So these are the questions that we have students fill out to help us write their letter of recommendation. It's extremely important that students provide us with as much detail as possible. I've had students who just write one sentence and turn it in, and really that's just doing a disservice to themselves for their letter of recommendation. This is our chance to really talk about their achievements, what they've been involved in, something that the transcript does not show or say. So it's really important that students take their time when answering these questions, and it helps when they attach a resume to it as well. There is a parent insight portion as well on this form. It's optional. I find it helpful because sometimes I get even better information from the parents. So if the parents want to fill out something or a questionnaire about their students that they think it's important that colleges know or that's highlighted in their letter of recommendation, they have this spot right here where they can indicate that. And then we have a little flow chart that we've created just to help you think about the process. The first 2 steps, matching your Common App account to your Naviance account. Again, that will be something that's covered when your student meets with their counselor. Your counselor will email you letting you know when that portal is open to sign up for an individual meeting with your counselor. It's not open yet, so there's nothing you need to sign up for now, but when it does, that's something we'll cover in our meeting. We will also cover how to add colleges to Naviance, especially the ones that you're applying to. You have to add them to your Naviance list so we can send your material. So those are 2 important first steps. And then you will complete a transcript request form for each school you apply to. So if you're applying to 5 universities, you're going to fill out 5 transcript request sheets. However, you only need to submit 1 student insight sheet. We don't need it 5 times. Once you've submitted it once, we have it and you're good to go.
All right, so trying to pull this all together, and I'm gonna take a second to just kind of switch my presenting view here a second. Okay, so now you should be seeing a spreadsheet for me, and there's a sample of that in the packet that you will receive from today's call. But this is a worksheet that I'm actually using with my senior. The information that's in here is just an example. But the idea is you should be identifying, 5 to 10 schools to apply to. Now, certainly we've had students apply to over 30 schools and others that are like, I am going early decision into this one school. And that's all they apply to. So there's certainly no right or wrong answer, but I'd say on average, most students apply somewhere between 5 to 10 schools. So I have an example of George Mason, Virginia Tech, and VCU here. And then I ask a couple of questions regarding the application process. So what kind of jumps out to me as you start filling this out is the application fee. So the application fees can start to add up into the hundreds of dollars very quickly. So keeping that list, again, between 5 and 10 is still not going to be overly cheap, but it could hopefully be manageable. So keep that in mind as you're looking at how many colleges your students should apply to, as well as the fact they really should feel like that's the school they could see themselves going to. And I know that's extremely difficult right now because most students haven't been able to visit a campus, but hopefully they're spending time looking at the virtual, what are they called? the drone of the campus, as well as participating in any virtual events those particular schools, so they do have an idea. The second thing is looking at how to apply. So again, we have CA, Common App, Coalition, COA, and then the Direct App being the university's own application. So this is going to become important to you as you get up to the 5, 7, 10 applications, that you don't want to have like 2 Common App, 2 Coalition, 3 different direct ones, because then you end up doing 5 different applications. So as you look at, where you're applying, also how are you applying? Because let's say we throw JMU into this mix. Well, JMU is only, James Madison is Coalition or Direct. So that's going to create 2 applications for you to fill out then. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at how you would apply to these schools. And just to give a little more definition on the Common App and the Coalition app, the Coalition app is a newer app, and only about 120, 140 schools accept the Coalition app, whereas the Common App is accepted by over 900 schools at this point. And the way to think about these is that you're basically filling out that application once with 75% of your information that'll just get reused. And then there's specific questions for the particular schools that you're applying to that make up the other 25%. So that might be, when you're applying, are you a legacy, essay questions, etc., for that particular school. So how do you get the answers to these questions? I find the easiest way to do this is just to Google how to apply to George Mason or how to apply to Virginia Tech. And that should take me to a direct link to that admissions page for that particular school that will give me most of this information. The bad news is it's certainly not consistent in terms of how that information is displayed or shared per school. But you can also refine that search more. Let's say you were able to find all the information on George Mason except for the fee. Well, then I would just Google application fee George Mason, and it should pop right up. The one thing I would be careful of as I look at the search results is sometimes it's not the school site that shows up first in the list. It might be US News and World Report or collegeniche.com. Always defer to the university website for the answer, because the information from the other sites just might be a little bit dated. And certainly in this year's application process, the currentness of the information is very key. We talked about deadlines and the types. We've talked about self-reporting and SAT and SAT optional. The letters of recommendation for the counselor or from the teacher, sometimes that's not as evident in terms of whether you should provide them or not. Sometimes they'll say optional. In this year, I would strongly encourage anything that's optional on the application that you submit it. As we said earlier, the admissions folks are looking holistically, and now they have a piece that's not going to be there, your test scores. So they're looking for any information they can get from you or your application to make a decision. And the reps will tell you they're not in the business of declining people, they're in the business of accepting people. So they will work with you and they want to see as much information that paints the best picture for you. So definitely get those letters of recommendation if you can. The other piece being the essays. As I just mentioned on the Common App and the Coalition app, those will be highlighted specifically for the school that you're applying to. So if you don't necessarily see essay information on the admissions website on how to apply, it will definitely tell you whether you need those essays in the Common and Coalition app. And just lessons learned from over the years, taking the time to do a good job on the essays is really important. Virginia Tech has this 4 short answers. They're very short answers, so you need to make the most of the space that they provide you. But it's all based around their mission statement, which is about service. So make sure you're taking the time to provide thoughtful answers there. And this applies across all universities. We've seen cases where UVA had legacy students, and I think the essays kind of broke them because they kind of phoned in the essays thinking they were good to go with that legacy status. So always put your best foot forward on your essays and spend the time to get them done. So the second half of this worksheet is around creating your own type of schedule. Again, what's in here are just example timeframes. It kind of backs up to what Ms. Cotta was saying in terms of you have to turn in your transcript and insight form 3 weeks prior to the actual deadline. So these are actually a little bit more aggressive. If you look at the example of George Mason, which has the early action deadline selected for November 1st, I believe on the transcript request form, it was due in October 10th or 11th. I had this being more towards the end of September, but that's just based on like my situation, so to speak, because you need to factor in, are you working, and are you working a lot of hours? So you may need to take more time to get this done, or be more disciplined about getting these deliverables done. Or you are in performing arts or sports or something else, or you're going to be going away for a certain period of time. So factor these in. Also factor in like what days could you set aside to actually work on this? Like you've got the Columbus Day holiday. You also have a holiday sometime the end of October, a teacher working day. So kind of map out when you want to get these different pieces done. And as you'll notice, every application is different. So you're going to need the SRAR here for Virginia Tech, not applicable to George Mason or VCU. Completing supplemental sections. Again, you need to pace yourself on getting these done. What bookends this are the letters of recommendation. I would suggest over the next couple of weeks, the teachers go back to actual work, I believe, mid to end of August, for you to email them and make a request to have them write a letter of recommendation for you. You will then go into Naviance and make that request as well, so that the teacher receives a link so they can upload your letter of recommendation. Then on the end of this is a thank you note. So always follow up with that teacher that may have taken the time to write you a glowing letter of recommendation. Let them know the outcomes of your application, or just thank them. I kind of picked around Thanksgiving because that's a great time to be thankful for the people that have helped you out. The one other column I want to talk about is the FAFSA. So we're not getting into financial aid on this call, but the FAFSA opens on October 1st. And like the Common App, there was probably going to be a lot of hoopla and a lot of schools saying, the FAFSA is now open, you can fill it out. Other institutions telling you to fill out that FAFSA. Well, the FAFSA every year is a software release, and software releases out of the gate can be a little buggy. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend filling out that FAFSA on October 2nd. And really, there isn't a reason to fill it out, because the FAFSA, when you fill it out, is then submitted to the colleges that you apply to. Well, if you're not applying until early action or even regular decision, your FAFSA is not as applicable then. I always recommend that you fill out that FAFSA by early to mid-November, because that tends to be when a lot of the priority dates are for colleges and their scholarships. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're for planning purposes. I have a couple of notes down on the bottom of this application, a couple being about financial aid nights and FAFSA complete nights. These were originally scheduled at Independence, and we tend to partner with the schools around us to work together. My guess is these will be virtual events, but you can put these on your calendars in terms of getting more help on the financial side. Just checking my notes, see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. Oh, just as an aside, we've been talking about primarily applying to four-year colleges. And I know we talked about NOVA at the beginning in terms of options for non-college with getting the certification, and that's all 100% great opportunities. But if you want to just apply to NOVA and then go on to get your four-year degree post after completing the 2 years at Nova. You just have to register for Nova. It's not really an application. Their representatives will tell you they like to take the top 100%. Nova also has another program called Pathways, which provides a little more help for those who may need it in transitioning from high school to college. There will be an application to fill out if you're interested in that pathway program. I don't have any more information on it today, but it's something that we work very closely with Nova, and more information will be coming. All right, so wrapping this all up, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so we've given you a lot of information, and you might actually feel a little worse than better, but please, please remember that we're giving you this information so that you have it, and the fact that we will continue to break it down further with you. As Ms. Cotta has says, you'll be meeting one-on-one with your counselors over the next couple of weeks or months, whenever you're able to schedule that. We also have the College Jumpstart application workshop, which will be the week of August 24th. Many of you signed up for it already, and we're still taking signups for that. It was originally going to be in person, so we're making some tweaks to how we're actually going to deliver this. But the application itself focuses on 3 pieces. One being the applications, where you roll up your sleeves, pull up that Common App, that Coalition app, and we'll start getting you going on those applications. The second piece is on essay writing. Mr. Anderson, one of our great English teachers, does a phenomenal job with a essay writing exercise. And then lastly, we partner with George Mason, and our rep there, Kelsey, we'll talk about what it's like from the admission side and what they're looking for, not just from George Mason, but admissions in general. So it's a great opportunity to kind of get some work done on your application itself, and kind of hear again all these different pieces that need to happen over the next couple of months. So I will send out a link for that with the recording of this. I will also be sending out the feedback we received from our representatives on test optional. And we will send out this abbreviated packet in the next week. Down the road, and you can start looking for, as you're checking that email, will be some of the follow-ups to the Q&As that we received today. You'll get a link at some point from Setmore to sign up for your time with your counselor. We will post the full packet for you on our website with all the links. So what Ms. Cotta went through in terms of the parent insight form, the student insight form, and the transcript form, those are all actual links to forms that you will be completing and submitting to them, and those will be live later this month. On your part, for right now, a couple things you should do is to sign up for rep visits. We already have over 20 college reps signed up to do a virtual visit with us. I've scheduled most of the visits to be on Mondays and then Tuesday and Wednesday nights, so that we're not disrupting any of the synchronous teaching that you have on Tuesdays through Fridays. I don't know that those sessions will be recorded, so I would make every attempt to attend the ones that you do sign up for. And I can show you that in a minute on Naviance. Think about where you plan to apply and start filling out this worksheet that we will send to you. You can start working on the questions that Ms. Cotta went through on the student insight form, thinking about those and writing them down in Word. And then when that link becomes active, you can easily just cut and paste it into the form and submit it. So that's all we had from a formal presentation. Jackie, I think we tried to hit most of the questions from the live presentation, but were there any others that we should go through?
There were a couple. One of the questions was, can a student send a thank you card in an email since the teachers are not in the building?
Yes. That's probably the preferred method at this point. And just the fact of acknowledging the effort that that teacher took to help them is great.
And then can students still sign up for the August 24th college startup?
Yeah, I will send out a link. Actually, I'll either send out the original link, or we maybe just be resetting it because we've got to change the format of that, given that we're going to be virtual. So short answer is yes.
And then how do parents go about getting their own login into Naviance?
Okay, so I'm struggling to switch gears here to Naviance, but let me see if we do this. Okay. Oh, not let me do that. Bear with me. So I'm just logging into Naviance. I also go through LCPS Go. My login just looks a little bit different, being on the school side. But I'm going to show you basically Barnes demo of it. So your view looks pretty much like this. The one thing I want to highlight on the homepage is that I talked to you, was about the rep visits. There's about 20 plus already scheduled. All you have to do is click on more information. You'll see that they're virtual, the date and time, and then you just hit register and you're done. We don't have the links yet for these virtual ones, so you'll get information closer to the date with the link to log into the actual event. The next thing I want to show you is on colleges and going to colleges I'm thinking about. So we talked about the scattergrams earlier. So if you look at James Madison here and click on more, you'll see scattergrams. And what this is taking you to is the admissions information for that particular school. It's a little slow in loading, but it tells you overall their acceptance rate, their main deadline, and a lot of other helpful information. But then it's also giving the history of Rockridge, of who's applied, how many were accepted, and how many actually enrolled. And so, you know, I don't have an example of one of the elite schools to show you, but it would look similar to this as well. So you'll see all the green are those that were accepted, the red were those that were declined, and the blue are for those that were deferred or waitlisted. So usually if this was an actual student, you would see a little like circle head in blue with shoulders, and that would indicate where you stand on this chart. As I said, this is in a regular year. This again is kind of a ballpark and directional, and not any type of guarantee that you would get in, because again, they're taking a holistic view, and this is just the GPA and the test scores. And now actually you're not even, you can pretty much throw out the test scores in a lot of cases. So, you know, if your little self person is down here, then I would take a beat and think about, why do I want to spend $65 to apply if I'm probably a very, very long shot in getting in? But, you know, if I'm up in here, and you really, really want to go to James Madison, then you might consider, you know, applying. And as we said, without having the test scores, they're going to take into account your GPA, what core classes you took, and how you did within them, as well as all the accompanying materials in terms of letters of recommendation, essays, etc. So really do a good job on all those additional components of the application. Jackie, anything else?
The next couple questions were how do I know who my new counselor is? And for that, you just log in into your student view and your counselor will be listed there. And the other question I think I can answer is, how do I get my updated transcript? That's also been uploaded onto your student view. And I think that might be it.
I know this wasn't a question asked, but I know that people have been asking about rank and so forth. And Ms. Sanabria, would you say that that's kind of a moving target as you're still registering new students? And I think we're still waiting on summer school grades, etc.
Yes, we have about 40 seniors that took summer classes. So seniors won't be ranked until sometime in September, mid to late September.
Okay. All right, anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, well, I think